Computer, we're recording. Are you all ready
Yes,
to
we
go?
are. Let's do it.
Cool. Okay. Welcome back to another edition of Undivided Attention, where we actually listen to an album in its entirety and then give, 30 minutes of critical feedback. I am excited to be doing this one. Broken Robots, Home is Not a Place. I think Tanner and I are probably both a little bit biased about this band because we both really like them. But I've been working with them for a bit now, probably close to a year on and off with press stuff, and it's been ramping up. But I've only kind of heard their new stuff. I knew this album was out there. I had listened to a couple of tracks that I liked. I hadn't sit down and actually listened to it until recently. I'm not sure why. And I was like genuinely really impressed with this. And I felt like I had to do a review on it, kind of strike when the iron's hot, when I was really kind of excited about hearing it for the first time. So that's where I'm coming from with this. And I'm curious to know, like, if you had heard this before, Tanner, or if you were kind of just sitting down to hear it for the first time.
I heard bits and pieces of this when you first introduced them to me, and especially after they came and did that Toledo parking lot show with you and Matt and Rover. It's just, it's with so many bands out in the world right now, it just seems like millions of bands are thrown at you right now, and more or less a lot of them sound the same. So it's really cool to hear a band that's just like, you can actually distinguish their sound from other bands. And as a side note, them being from Chicago, it's cool to get that Midwest representation.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let's just jump right in, man.
Yeah.
I kind of want to talk about just stuff overall I liked about this. And I'm going to do this review kind of from the perspective that they're probably going to share this, and their fans will be seeing this to some extent. One of the things I wanted to say kind of right off the bat, this was their very first record almost exactly 2 years ago. And they didn't have their bassist, Lonnie, yet when they were making this. So in a lot of ways, I felt like, and maybe this is something that I don't want to necessarily say deterred me from listening to it at first, but their stuff with Lonnie is just, I think it's so incredible. And it's just kind of, I don't want to say it sounds like a different band, but there's a different essence there. Once they added him, the chemistry, you can tell the chemistry definitely changed from like these songs to the newer ones they've been putting out. Like it's just, sonically it's a little bit different. Like it's definitely groovier, the newer stuff. But I just think the kind of essence of what the project was kind of stepped up in a real serious way between this album and their newer stuff. That being said, like this album holds up incredibly well. Like, and it reminds me of a lot of stuff that was kind of going on. Even like, it reminds me of like mid 2000s kind of like indie rock a lot of times. Stuff that I listened to like on like college radio when I was, when I was in like my late teens, in a really fresh way that like that whole genre has gotten kind of stale. And this sounds like really fresh. Reminds me of the same energy that bands had back then. It's like really fun loving at times in a way that bands aren't doing.
I agree. And if there's any band, if there's really any, they're again, they have such a unique sound that they're one of those bands that they're really hard to compare to other bands.
Right.
But if I were to, and it's funny how you mentioned like mid 2000s, because the band I would compare them the most, or if I was talking to someone being like, they kind of sound like this, I'd almost compare them to mid 2000s Gorillaz.
Okay. Yeah. Totally.
So like that's just the kind of vibe I'm getting, whether it's because they do a lot of obviously straight ahead, rock nuances, but with a lot of sampling, not to carry the song, but to like add the flavor to the song and to really be a musical element.
That's something that really stood out. There's a lot of, like, I would probably call it like glitch production. There's a lot of like skippy little things that the production's fantastic on this too. I really like it. I mean, it's, I don't know, kind of scrappy or like scrappier than some of the newer stuff they're doing. I know that they've talked to me, a ton of times about how they just keep getting better and better at their production. But the production is really good and it's really unique. There's a lot of really cool. It does kind of remind me of Gorillaz. There's a lot of like sampled stuff and like break beats in certain songs that come across that way. I also think it kind of sounds like OK Go at times. I've always, even with their newer stuff, I always
I can
thought they
see that.
sounded a little bit like OK Go, and OK Go is also from Chicago. But
I didn't know they're from Chicago as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. This kind of just has like that. There's some guitar moments that, that kind of like big power pop thing, and I think some of their big rock moments are kind of like sacrificed on the new stuff for like more subdued kind of trip hop, more chill kind of stuff. But I think those moments really, like the big rock moments, really work on this record. It's just different than what I expected going into it. But yeah, overall, I really love this. I think it's so hard to even call something overrated nowadays. But
Right.
or like underrated. Sorry, but there's just so many albums that kind of slip through the cracks, and there's more albums being made now than there's ever before. I just think that this is like I could see this gaining more and more fans. This album in particular, as they continue to grow as a band that puts out new music. Fans kind of rediscovering this as they learn more about who Broken Robots are.
No,
So
for sure. And some I kind of like to add is like, especially like in the guitar or like rock world in general, it kind of seems like a lot of people like to think that everything's kind of been done, or like every kind of guitar tone has been done, every kind of thing, whatever has been done. But I feel like Tony, the guitar player, he's done like using a lot of different tones, or how he uses the guitar is like very different from like
yeah,
your classic rock or alternative like kind of guitar style, like where just it's almost like using the guitar as a sampling kind of thing. And I feel like he's
yeah,
almost thinking kind of almost like a DJ effect, like how
yep,
Tom Morello does in Rage Against the Machine, which is funny because they're not a Chicago band, but Tom Morello himself is from. It must be something about Chicago,
something in
just
the
like
water. There's lead in
some
the water. It
something
makes you
in
good at
the
guitar.
something in Lake Michigan, dude, for real.
Yeah, it's like all that green dye they put on St. Patrick's Day just contaminates the water year round and makes them good at guitar.
Right. I think it's just the way he. I guess just the way he like uses the guitar is just really unique, and the best way to describe it is to just listen to it.
So you said something really interesting. Like this kind of sounds like, um, you know, like at times a big rock record with like I guess that guitar DJ production sample kind of effects.
Yeah.
I think their newer stuff sounds more just kind of like it's like leaning even harder into like the chiller side, the more kind of like DJ, whatever you want to call that.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of like almost dance to it a little bit more than the newer stuff, with rock moments. But this was like a rock record with DJ moments. That's kind of how it felt. So it's interesting to see the production that they've done from this to kind of where they're heading in general. And again, like maybe that has something to do with adding like their bass player Lonnie is like a kind of like a full-on writing member for the newer stuff. Like again, the chemistry changes. Like it just does when you make decisions like that. And clearly it's like a change, just a step forward for them, the stuff that they've been doing recently. But yeah, it almost sounds like a different category, this record versus where they're going. So it was kind of interesting to look back too. Like it was interesting to start listening to stuff they put out recently and then listen to the old stuff. It's always cool to discover an album that way. But again, this holds up incredibly well. And
It really does.
I wanted to kind of
And
ask you what songs you, because I had 4 that really stuck out to me, and I wanted to kind of see which ones, maybe were your favorites as you were listening through.
yeah, for sure. And actually, before we get that, I just want to
Sure.
make a quick note that going through like all these songs that the singer Kat, she's like, first of all, she's incredible vocalist, and also she doesn't sing the same song, or she doesn't sing each song the same. Like every song
Yeah.
like has a distinct vocal style, whether it's like actual singing or like what's really popular right now is like mumble rap. Some of that it's like she's almost doing that, but it's like taking the mumble out of it. You know what I mean? Like just very clean
It's the
spoken
same kind of
words.
flow, but yeah, she's really articulate. I actually made a note here too. Like her voice sounds pretty different on this record, and
Hmm.
from what I know, it seemed like this is 2018. Like I know she was still kind of newish to like being in a band, and to only say from that like her voice is gotten her voice is just growing in leaps and bounds with all the new stuff they're putting out. Like I think she's really found her voice on the newer stuff,
Mhm.
but there are moments on this where you're like, okay, that's like that trademark thing that you're starting to do. Like you start to hear that. Yeah, it definitely some moments where there's one song in particular, and I'll kind of kick it off because I think this is my favorite song on the record, "Satan's Lunchbox," track 6,
Yeah, that's a
where
cool song.
her voice, she does the verses like really chill, and then the chorus is probably the most aggressive moment on any Broken Robot song I've ever heard.
You see, that's a
Um,
note. That's a note I made, like for because I took a couple of notes for like each song in this album, and which is like it's about just under 35 minutes, like as an album in total. It goes from 0 to 100 really quick on Satan's
yeah,
Lunchbox. Like, and also it's also another thing like the song. It's like the actual like instrumentation is pretty chill, but it's like the title, the subject matter, and also how her vocals go are very like not chill. If that's a
yeah,
for lack of a better term.
it's a really really good chorus. There's a lot of really good choruses on this record. This is probably maybe the best,
Hmm.
top two favorite choruses on this record. But yeah, it's really aggressive. The drum sound is super blown out and aggressive when it gets that chorus, really big sounding. Her voice, yeah, it does that thing that like, I think a good vocalist can kind of, it's not, it's not like tone or pitch or any of that. I think their personality comes out with little things that they do. And
The
that
dynamics of it.
the whisper thing she does just, it sounds like Cat. And it just, kind of almost sounds like discovering her voice or something on this track. Like it was really powerful to kind of listen to this one a couple of times. It reminds me of this one. Really reminds me of like those mid 2000s like indie pop bands, like
Hmm.
Silver Sun Pickups was what I got from this right away. Which again
Yeah.
is interesting. I don't know if they have another song they've ever done that sounds quite like Silver Sun Pickups. It almost has it's got like a melancholy vibe to it. But it they had I forget what it's called. Silver Sun Pickups had an EP in 2005. It was like the first thing that they put out, or like one of the first things. Um, but that was a really big influence on me years back, especially when I was doing Secret Space. And there's something about that guitar hook in the beginning that runs through the verses that had that feel to it. It almost sounds like the Joy Formidable too. I don't know if you know that band. Um,
I'm familiar.
yeah, like a lot of a lot of those like you know, kind of like college rock back in the day before they became like megastar kind of bands. It has that kind of potential to it.
Right.
Um, and last thing too on this track, I really like. There's this little Tony has a lot of back vocals on this record, which I think is really cool. I know he
I,
does on the other stuff, but it seems like it's a little more prominent. And
I was
he's
gonna
got
say I was gonna
yeah,
say overall I make comments on all the songs or most of the songs and how like whether like another song example would be the song after Satan's Lunchbox, Graveyard Season. Like they just do
yeah.
this really cool back and forth duet thing, but then like also those background harmonies Tony does like just all over the album's really cool.
There's a cool moment on Satan's Lunchbox where there's like a stutter vocal production thing in the
Hmm.
second verse where she's singing. It keeps going do 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 do. That's a really cool moment. That was really fresh when I heard that. Yeah, Graveyard Season 2. That kind of reminded me of like the Hush sound or something. That's a really upbeat, really really cool song. I don't know. I feel like I don't hear upbeat music like that nearly as much.
I
But
agree.
it kind of brought me back to like being in college or something, where maybe things were more optimistic back then. But it's such a good chorus on that track. Um, yeah. Um, what other tracks did you like, man? Maybe we had a couple of the same favorites too.
Yeah, for sure. I kind of want to go with. I think the first one I want to go with is "Homemade Hand Grenades," and the
Yeah,
reason like that song sticks out to me is like there's so much going on in this album in general that I feel like out of all the songs, "Homemade Hand Grenades" I kind of wrote down as like the gateway Broken Robot song.
yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
like it's just like I think that's just like the one song at least to me where every single element of the band is just in one like you know package. And I mean the whole album's a package, but like if you were to show one song I think that best represents what the band's all about in terms of obviously like their traditional rock instrumentation as well as like they can like use like their sampling and vocals in like different ways, but like in the same song.
That's a really interesting one. I like when in songwriting when somebody can write something like very thematic where it becomes the oh that's the blank song, and to me that's the internet song because that first line, and it just kind of has that robotic feel. It's a little on the nose, but a lot of the songs on this record, like production wise, they just kind of have like a super, I mean, Broken Robots, they have like a super glitchy kind of like cyber robotic
Hmm.
production thing going on to them, but like
That's kind
that
of like the whole aesthetic of the band in general.
yeah, and especially on this album, which I really like those production moments. I just love that line. I was literally raised on the internet. It just it seems to fit the essence of the band really well, and you can just kind of like win. I love when you can win people over with an idea just in the first line, and then you're hooked. You're like, okay, I know what you mean. Like
Hmm.
that's when I first heard this one. That was the thought I had. Like, yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and then like you're just kind of drawn in for the rest of it. The production matches that line too. Like
Right.
it just kind of feels like robot computer music, and it's a really good. I agree, it's a really great chorus because it is kind of that bridge between where they are now and where they started, where it has that
Hmm.
kind of trip hop groove, down tuned drum kit thing, and the bass really has like a riff to it.
Right. And I remember that was one of the like the first couple of songs they played at that parking lot show, and I just remember that was like one of those songs that just kind of like hooked me in immediately.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a really like bold way to start a set, for example, because like
Yeah.
you're not going to hear that like bass line and that first vocal, the first lyrics, and like just think it's another indie rock band. You know what I'm saying? Like my gripe with indie rock, the more and more I hear certain stuff, is that sometimes, and it's not that I dislike this, but sometimes bands get a little bit too poetic to where like they're just kind of singing about something really vague. And then if you hear too many bands like that in a row, it's just like, okay, it'd be really refreshing if someone just said something like on the nose and like very literal.
We can chill on the metaphors a little bit.
Right. This
We
is
can chill out on those.
this is not a metaphor. This whole the lyrics in the song are not metaphorical. Also, I wanted to note real quick on this one too. It does this really cool thing where the first and second verse are pretty much the same lyrics,
Hmm.
and it doesn't sound boring. And to me, that's like a very like Kurt Cobain, like Nirvana thing, where you can just kind of repeat the lyrics again, but just since the song has gone to a certain point, maybe the intent feels a little bit different. And I love when bands are able to do that convincingly. So kudos on that for this track.
I agree. Another song that really stuck out to me was the very first song, "Bad Habits." It's just a cool. First of all, it's just a really cool way of kicking off an album, and the vibe I got, and this really, I give credit to Kat and like her, awesome, style of singing, or excuse me, like multiple styles of singing is, I guess traditionally. Oh, then
Here
got
comes the
my
dog.
got the dog. This is Hef. He just loves to play
What's
his
his name?
toys. Hef, Hef.
Hef.
Yeah,
Nice.
it's short for Hephaestus, but we just call him Hef.
Hephaestus.
Yeah, it's like I think it's like some Greek or Roman god. He's my roommate's dog. He came up with him. He's
Well,
just
he's
a very
he's
lovable dog.
invited. He seems cool. He's invited.
I mean, he was listening to he really liked Broken Robots when I was listening to it. Prior to this video call. But anyway, back
A
to Bad
band that
Habit.
dogs can like. There you go.
Can't go
There you
wrong
go.
with
Can't
that.
beat that.
But yeah, so like with Bad Habits, what was and with Cat singing in particular, a lot of times in the hip hop world, you have rappers that will sample or rap over rock songs or like rock riffs. Where I feel like this is kind of the opposite, where this is very much like a hip hop style
Delivery.
instrumentation, but
Yeah.
she's singing over it. So I thought that was a cool like role reversal thing.
Yeah, this one just kind of screamed Beck to me. It reminded me of early
Yeah,
Beck, and not in a rip-off way, just in like a genuine influence way. Kind of has that acoustic guitar thing going on. Super catchy chorus. Super, maybe it's the catchiest chorus on the record. I found myself singing this all week, on and off, just walking around the house. Um, And it's cool too. I love the form of this. There's no like extended bridge. Sometimes a song, because like a bridge is supposed to be like a new song in a song.
Yeah.
Sometimes songs don't need bridges. They just need like a reset, and then you get to the last chorus. And that makes this a really good opening track because it just like gets the vibe of the song across. I also think too, like, you know, just knowing their backstory, it's a really good first track to just kind of like kick it off with like, here's who we are. It kind of dives into that a little bit. And you know, again, it's that thing. This is not just like another indie rock band where it's just going to be like, you know, they're singing about vague stuff. You know, this is like this this song kicks off the album with a very specific intent.
Hmm.
Um, so that this is it's a really great track. Definitely, you know, I definitely think that again that chorus is probably it's either Satan's Lunchbox or this, and I think this is the catchiest chorus on the whole record.
No, absolutely. I think Broken Robots are just one of those bands that just kind of laid out like they're very open about like who they're about. Like you said, if you know their backstory, and I'm sure you can look up more about that. But they're definitely not writing songs that or like using subject matter that other people have used. They're definitely writing about like their own personal, whether it's experiences, views, or
Yeah,
this is very much like them and like their world.
I was thinking today too. I wonder if that's just kind of where music is heading in general. Like, you know, I think you could make an argument that before this year, maybe there were like too many hobbyist bands, or like things were kind of getting crowded with like people who just kind of want to do it for fun or do it for fashion or whatever it happens to be, which in a way is fine. But sometimes you overlook the bands that are really trying to be serious and go for
Hmm.
it if there's too many of those. And now I have a feeling that when bands slowly kind of come back and start figuring out ways to do shows again, people are going to want to focus on the bands that are like serious, like let's make a real go for it. And you know, Broken Robots are certainly that type of band. And I was just pleasantly surprised to like even hear that like on their first record early on, because a lot of times with the band, their first record, they're still finding themselves. And I think, you
Hmm.
know, I think to some extent they were still finding themselves on this record, but like there's a lot of really serious moments where, you know, if this is all they had as their discography, it would be like, you got to take this seriously. Like, you know, this is not just your average you know, group of guys playing guitars or whatever. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on.
No,
um
that's a good point about like having to be the first album because a lot of times when a first album comes out, the musicians in said band that's like the album they've been working on their entire lives type of thing.
right.
Whereas like this feels so like with a lot of like first albums, it might be like a form of immaturity. Not so much like what do you think of immaturity, but more just like
Like
it's
sonic
like the first,
immaturity, or like, you know, they don't,
just just like
it's
the
not
first.
totally
It's like
fleshed out.
exactly, it's like the first thing they've really ever done, so they're still figuring it out. But for a first album, this feels like very mature, and plus, like I mean, everybody in the band's like been adults for a while, so I think this is a very mature take on a first album. Because
Yeah,
like you said, or like kind of like we said, it's just like first albums are very much like here's who we are, but we're still kind of figuring ourselves out. Like this is a very
it's further along than most first
yeah,
albums.
it's very confident. It's like here's who we are. This is our first album. Bam. Like
Yeah,
they're
yeah, it
just
is. It is because
so.
there are a lot of risks, like a lot of risky. I mean, I think even like the rapping would probably be off-putting to some people if they don't like rap with their indie rock. Now, I do. If you know me, you know
Hmm.
that I love that kind of stuff. And it seems like, you know, the fans they found like just absolutely love this sound. You know, the fans they found so far. But yeah, I agree. Like it's very bold. It's a very confident way to just kind of kick things off, and you know, it seems like it's just kind of getting more figured out as they go. Um,
Right.
I
And
wanted.
another
Oh,
one more
sorry.
left. You're
Yeah,
good. One other thing I just wanted to add, just generally speaking, is I guess where bands are in this world, like a lot of bands don't like to pigeonhole themselves into one genre. Like they just like to take all their influences and put it in one. I feel like these guys are a perfect example of like appropriately blending genres. So like rock, hip hop, rap, indie, just a good, just kind of like the good of everything, but putting it in a package fresh.
yeah. Yeah,
So.
totally. Because that's hard to do in the, this was 2018. That's pretty hard to do in 2018 too. Like it seems like everything's been done, and then every once in a while I hear a band where there's a little bit of light where it's like maybe not everything's been done. Like, obviously this sounds like some stuff that you've heard, like we've been comparing it to other bands, but on the whole, no, it doesn't really sound like
Hmm.
they've really got their own. It's not even like they have their own sound. They just have their own essence, and I think part of that is like you just kind of feel like you know them, and this is like I know them as people, but if you didn't, I feel like when you listen to this you kind of already feel like you know them as people, and that's the hardest thing to do as a band. Like you feel like, oh, I know them personally just because they're having these certain moments in their songs, or they're really going for it on certain vocal lyrical moments. I think that's what I mean when I say the essence of the band. Like you just kind of already have a personal connection with them even if you didn't know them. Which is, again, that's like, I feel like that's just the hardest thing in the world to do as a band. And when you really, when you've got lightning in a bottle, with a certain kind of thing you're going for, I think it just comes across. I wanted to shout out a couple other tracks too before I
Yeah.
forget. I like the track Slow Motion. I think it's a really good, just like album track. Not that that's derogative in any way, but it's just like shorter. It kind of feels like halfway through the album. I like when there's kind of like lighter tracks halfway through the album where you're not like bogged down by like trying to get too
Hmm.
many ideas across. And yeah, I really like when they lean into more. That track's almost like acoustic, or like it reminds me of not not to keep comparing to other bands. There's a lot of sounds on this record that happen to be reminiscent of stuff that I like, or I feel like people don't know as well. Like there's this band called Soul Coughing from the '90s who were kind of like they're almost like a jazz combo meets hip hop, and some of the sounds on this Slow Motion track kind of reminded me of that band. Um, and yeah, I again, like I can't say this enough about this record. The production's very unique. Tony has really cool back vocals on this one that come and go. Like it's kind of like a trade-off thing, like you mentioned
Hmm.
on the other
I was
track.
I was gonna say the note I made about slow motion. It's just like a really cool duet between Cat and
Yeah,
Tony vocals. And
yeah,
like as I actually had a good point you said about like it's a good segue because like I feel like the first half of the album is very much like I don't want to say in your face, but just, like there's just like a lot going on.
It's a lot. There's a lot of bangers right up front.
The bank, yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas slow motion, whether you want to call it the halfway point or the intersection to the halfway or like the second half, it's like literally slow motion. Like it takes the album, slows it down a little bit, and then just adds a different vibe and flavor.
I don't
And
think you could go from like homemade hand grenades to Satan's lunchbox. You know what I
no,
mean? It's a good, like I love albums that pace themselves like that, where they ease you into a big change for what's going to come.
I would say like the flow of the album is like very unique, but it also feels good.
That
Like,
duet thing you mentioned too on this track, man, I think that's what I kind of want to get at too, about like getting to know a band personally. I feel like when you hear two singers go back and forth, good band who did that back in the mid aughts was the Hush Sound.
mm-hmm,
Um, I feel like when you hear that kind of stuff, that's when it starts feeling like you know them. It's not just like the vocals aren't just another instrument. Like they really stand out as having something important to say, and that's the impression I got on Slow Motion. And then the last track I want to mention, Rat Fight. I Gotta Go, the second track on the record.
mm-hmm.
Um, it almost kind of feels like jammy in a way. Like it could be in like they could play this in like the jam band scene or something, and people would get it a lot. I think a lot of the imagery in that chorus at the end, she's just kind of saying a bunch of stuff. It makes me laugh every time. I don't know why, but she's talking about like I don't know if there's like a party at Marty's or something like that. She's
Yeah,
talking about it. Kind of reminds me of like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds or something. I don't know if she says like marmalade or something, but I feel like it almost feels like psychedelic or something like that. And again, it
no,
has
for
that
sure.
that like rock hip hop Beck kind of hybrid thing, like a boom bap thing going on. And
Yeah, I think I kind of commented on well the first thing is being the second track, like overall, like I said, I feel like all the vocals are approached differently with each song. So like you go from Bad Habits to Rat Fight, it's like a completely different style of
Yeah.
singing. I also kind of wrote down like, them being called broken robots and using a lot of programming and sampling. I almost kind of said the vocals are programmed, like almost like a robot, like the way she announces and pronounces everything is almost like programmed. She's clearly doing it, but just she almost wants to like replicate uh like as if a robot was singing it.
Yeah, it definitely there's a theme to it for sure, especially throughout this record versus newer stuff that they've done. I kind of feel that way on the rap is really cool in the second verse on this one. And again, it's like one of those like kind of bold moves where like bold for like a band on their first effort to just to kind of have a rap in the second verse. It does that thing too where like the first verse and the second verse are completely different. I really like that. A lot of times if I'm listening to even like a good song, if it gets to the second verse and there's not enough of a change, I oftentimes lose interest. But yeah, this is a really good example of what to do in those situations to like keep things just new and moving. So
For sure.
yeah, those are my favorites on this. I mean, I think it works really well as obviously as a whole. And I think, hopefully people watching this have listened to it, or if you haven't, definitely dig into this. But yeah, high praise on my end, man. And again, I don't know why I hadn't ever sat down and listened to it all the way through. I just heard some songs on and off, but I'm gonna be jamming it this fall. It's gonna be cool to really get to know this more. So that's my take on this one. Do you have anything else you want to add?
I just wanted to talk about one more song real quick.
Oh, sure,
actually.
sure.
So with all the different soundscapes and elements and influences Broken Robots had, they could easily be like a wall of sound if they wanted to. But the third song, String
Yeah.
Theory, it's a good
Yeah.
example of the band uses a lot of dynamics, but at the same time, they like to leave a lot of space and holes, whether it's accenting or just flat out dropping out. Like when you listen to the song, like first of all, like the bass playing on this album as a whole is really, really, really cool. And I know Lonnie, he definitely carries that on since he joined the band. So whether Tony played bass on it or whoever played bass, like the bass playing on this album is really solid. I just love how there just sometimes like the bass just like drops out, and you can definitely feel it, but it kind of allows everything else to either carry or highlight itself real quick, and then it just comes back in. And like I said, they could be totally a wall of sound if they wanted to, but they definitely want to leave space and breathing room for whether it's a guitar line or a vocal line or just some kind of sonic soundscape to have like its moment to shine. So I think String Theories are like one of my favorite songs on this album.
It's really dynamic when the guitar comes in on the chorus. I think that's one of the main OK Go moments that I was really hearing.
Yeah.
It sounds like their OK Go's first record or something. Yeah, I'm gonna keep shouting out bands that this stuff reminds me of, because I think there's some cool stuff that maybe people haven't heard that maybe they can get turned on to. But it kind of reminds me of like the Temper Trap. I don't know if you've ever heard that band. They were
I
kind of
believe
like,
so, actually.
they were like 2008. They were almost like predecessors to like Young the Giant, bands that got really big after
Okay.
them. But that drum groove is great. The drum and bass groove is really good. That does sound like it could be like a more, like a newer Broken Robot song. It does feel like it's bridged that gap, that bass and drum thing going on there. Yeah, I like this one too, for sure. It has a lot of really good grooves on it, and a lot of bands can fall into the trap of just playing four on the floor or whatever, but this has a lot of good groove change ups, and that's something I really like about this band and this record. Like, there's no better way to signify you're hitting like a moment, like a moment in a song with a groove change up. And they always do a really good job of that when they go to different parts of songs. And this song's a good example of that.
No, for sure. I just think overall Home Is Not a Place is a really cool album if you're looking for something familiar but different, because like it's like we've talked about, they pulled in so many different influences on top of like their own personal journey as people. And something in music, especially in the modern era or the digital era, is like even when a song or album is released, it can almost feel old after a month because so much is coming out, especially right now. Like everybody's or most people are definitely releasing songs because there's what else is there to do during a
Right.
pandemic. But so yeah, like something can be released in a month or so and like feel old, whereas this came out roughly 2 years ago, and something this like coming out in 2018 still feels good in 2020. So that's a something I want to give them credit for, is like they can make something that feels fresh in the moment, but it can still feel fresh after the fact. So that's like especially right now, that's really rare for a lot of bands. Like
Yeah.
you could definitely hear something and be like, oh, that sounds like 2005 or that feels like 2010. But like with this feels like it could
Just
someone
feels
could
like
probably
broken robots, man.
it feels like broken
It
robots.
really does. I think too. Like I've heard some of their newer fans are starting to get turned on to this, and that's. I'll end it with this. That's something I want to see happen more going forward. That like people put full records out, and maybe there's a little bit of patience with how they get received. Like if it doesn't immediately get picked up and become like a like this big thing, maybe it exists in your discography for fans to find later. And
Hmm.
I bet you more people are listening to this record now than when they released it 2 years ago. So that's a lesson to be learned
Hmm.
about these kind of records, and to really engage with it all comes down to your fan base, having a good fan base, really engaging with them, keeping up with them, and making sure they know about the whole story, because this is just a piece of the story for them. I believe I was looking on their Instagram, and I believe they got married the day this was released 2 years ago. Um,
That's really cool.
October 1st. There's a story, but there's just such a story behind this band, like with everything that they do. So to have a little bit of that context, and just to know this was their first record, and to be able to dig in after the fact, it was really cool to be able to um, have this become a new favorite record that I've got now that I can go listen to. So yeah, highly recommended. Um, this has been Undivided Attention, and yeah, I appreciate you listening to it, Tanner. This was cool to do, and I'm sure there's a lot more records out there like this, so we'll keep doing this.
No, definitely looking forward to it. And the last thing I'll say
Yeah,
is
go for it.
I'm very thankful that when you had your parking lot show back in June, I believe that their Broken Robots were able to drive out from Chicago, and it was just really cool to one see live music in such an odd year, but to get to meet them in person and hearing them live. And I'm definitely they're just really great people, they're very authentic with how they carry themselves, and I'm really looking forward to see what else they'll accomplish from here on out. And definitely rooting for them. And please look up Broken Robots on all social media and all streaming platforms. These guys are, if you're looking for something different but feels good, Broken Robots is your band. And I just, there's great. I can't give them more love than that. Like, well, I can, but you know what I'm saying. So, Broken
Yeah,
Robots, I stand with them.
well, we'll leave it there. All right, till
Cool.
next time.
Later.
Peace.